By the autumn of 1942, the Axis controlled more of the world than any power in modern history. German tanks stood at the gates of a Russian city on the Volga. German and Italian forces were pushing deep into Egypt, within reach of the Suez Canal. And in the Pacific, Japan's navy seemed unstoppable. Then, within the span of about 6 months, 3 battles quietly broke the back of that entire empire. None of them were the end of the war. But after them, the Axis never won another major campaign. Welcome back to the series. This is episode 6, The Turning Point. To understand why these battles mattered so much, you first have to see just how far the Axis had come. By mid-1942, German armies occupied most of continental Europe. They controlled Norway in the north, France in the west, the Balkans in the south, and vast stretches of the Soviet Union in the east. Japan controlled an empire stretching from the borders of India to the edge of Australia. On the map, it looked as though nothing could stop them. But an empire that size has a hidden weakness. It has to defend everything, everywhere, all at once, and it only takes a handful of failures in the right places to start pulling the whole structure apart. Our first stop is North Africa. For 2 years, British and Axis forces had been chasing each other back and forth across the Egyptian and Libyan desert, hundreds of miles in each direction. Whoever controlled this stretch of coastline controlled the Suez Canal, the shortcut to Middle Eastern oil and to Britain's empire in Asia. Leading the Axis forces was a general whose reputation had grown almost into legend. His British opponents nicknamed him the Desert Fox for his speed and his knack for surprising them. By the summer of 1942, his forces had pushed the British back deep into Egypt to a small stretch of desert near a railway stop called El Alamein. It was the last defensible line before the Suez Canal itself. If it broke, the British position in the entire Middle East could collapse. But the Desert Fox had a problem that would define this entire campaign. He was running out of everything: fuel, ammunition, replacement tanks. Every gallon of gasoline his army needed had to cross the Mediterranean Sea, where British aircraft and submarines operating from a besieged island called Malta were sinking his supply ships faster than they could arrive. His tanks were, quite literally, running dry in the desert. The British, meanwhile, brought in a new commander, a careful, methodical general who insisted on overwhelming superiority before he would attack. He built up men, tanks and aircraft to a scale the Axis simply could not match. And crucially, thanks to intercepted German radio codes, he often knew what his opponent was planning before the orders even reached the front. In October 1942, that British army launched a massive offensive at El Alamein. 12 days of brutal, grinding combat followed, through minefields, in close-range tank battles, under relentless artillery. With his tanks stranded and out of fuel, the Desert Fox had no way to maneuver, no way to counter the weight being thrown against him. His army broke and retreated west across the same desert it had crossed in triumph, month after month for 2 straight years. It was the first big, unambiguous land victory the British had won against Germany in the entire war. Winston Churchill later said of it, "Before Alamein, we never had a victory. After Alamein, we never had a defeat. Now we cross to the complete opposite side of the planet." 6 months earlier, the Pacific looked like a one-sided war. Japan had swept from Pearl Harbor across an enormous stretch of ocean, and its carrier fleet had not lost a single major battle. The Japanese Navy decided to press its advantage and aim for a knockout blow, an attack on a tiny American-held atoll called Midway. It sat almost exactly in the middle of the Pacific, and whoever held it could threaten the other side's shipping for thousands of miles. The Japanese plan was to lure the last of America's aircraft carriers into a trap and destroy them for good. There was just one enormous problem with that plan. American codebreakers had already cracked much of the Japanese naval code. They knew the target. They knew roughly the date. They even knew the structure of the attacking force. So instead of walking into a trap, the American Navy set one of its own, positioning its carriers in ambush, hidden and waiting, exactly where the Japanese fleet didn't expect them to be. On the 4th of June, 1942, the two fleets finally found each other. Early strikes by American planes were thrown back with heavy losses, and for a moment it looked as though the ambush had failed completely. But then, in the space of about 5 minutes, everything changed. American dive bombers arrived directly over the Japanese carriers at the single worst possible moment, while their flight decks were crowded with fully fueled aircraft and armed bombs. Caught in the middle of switching from one strike package to another, there was no time to launch a defense. 3 Japanese aircraft carriers were set ablaze almost simultaneously. A fourth would be sunk later that same day. In a single afternoon, Japan lost 4 of the 6 aircraft carriers that had launched the attack on Pearl Harbor, along with hundreds of their most experienced pilots and aircrew. Men who, unlike aircraft, could not simply be replaced on a factory floor. It was one of the most complete naval reversals in military history. Before Midway, Japan had been choosing where the war would be fought next. After it, that initiative was gone for good, and it would never return. And now, the third battle, the one that would prove the most decisive and the most horrifying of them all. After the failure to take Moscow the previous winter, Hitler shifted his ambitions south, toward the oil fields of the Caucasus, and a city on the Volga River that happened to carry Stalin's own name. Taking that city was not strictly a military necessity. The river could have been crossed and controlled without capturing it block by block, but its symbolic value made it irresistible to both dictators. What followed was some of the most brutal urban combat ever recorded. German and Soviet soldiers fought for individual buildings, sometimes for individual floors and stairwells, in what soldiers on both sides came to call the Rat War. A factory, a train station, and a single hill changed hands dozens of times. The city was reduced to rubble, and the rubble itself became the battlefield. By November, German forces held perhaps 90% of the city, pinning the last Soviet defenders into a thin strip along the riverbank itself. It looked, from the outside, like Germany was on the verge of victory. It was, instead, a trap closing shut. While the German Sixth Army exhausted itself in that block-by-block fighting, the Soviet High Command was quietly assembling massive fresh forces on the flanks to the north and south of the city, sectors that were held not by German troops, but by weaker Romanian, Italian, and Hungarian units. On the 19th of November 1942, the Soviets launched a massive counter-offensive against exactly those weaker flanks. The lines collapsed almost immediately. Within 4 days, 2 Soviet spearheads had linked up behind the city, sealing the encirclement completely. An entire German army, 250,000 men, was now trapped inside Stalingrad, surrounded on every side. Hitler forbade any attempt to break out. He was promised the army could be supplied entirely by air. It could not. Deliveries fell far short of what the trapped men needed, and through the depths of a Russian winter, German soldiers inside the pocket slowly ran out of food, fuel, ammunition, and hope. On the 2nd of February 1943, what remained of the Sixth Army finally surrendered. Roughly 91,000 starving, frostbitten German soldiers were marched into Soviet captivity. Very few of them would ever see home again. It was the single largest surrender in the history of the German army, and psychologically, it broke something that could not be repaired. For the first time, ordinary Germans understood, in a way that propaganda could no longer hide, that the war in the East could actually be lost. Now step back and look at all 3 of these battles side by side. El Alamein in early November 1942, Stalingrad's encirclement beginning later that same month, and Midway, months earlier that same year, already quietly setting the stage. Individually, each one was a defeat for the Axis. Together, they were something much larger. The moment the strategic initiative of the entire war changed hands. Before these battles, the Axis powers decided where and when the fighting would happen. After them, it was the Allies making those choices, and the Axis reacting, defending, retreating. None of these victories ended the war on their own. There were still 2.5 more years of brutal fighting ahead, and millions more lives yet to be lost. Germany and Japan were still enormously powerful, still capable of ferocious resistance, but the momentum, the sense of inevitability that the Axis had carried since 1939 was broken, permanently. From this point forward, the map would only shrink for them. With the tide turned in the desert, in the Pacific, and on the Volga, the Allies now faced a new question. Not whether they could win, but how to strike at the heart of occupied Europe itself. That answer was already being planned, in secret, along the coastline of northern France. It would become the largest seaborne invasion ever attempted. That's Episode 7. D-Day and the Liberation of Europe. If this series is doing it for you, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next one. And tell me in the comments, of these 3 battles, which one do you think mattered most to the outcome of the war? See you in the next episode.